ballet.
All right, can you all see that? Can you see my screen? Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here, and let me echo my thanks as well to the organizers of this conference. And I would also like especially to thank my Russian colleagues who have been of so much help and assistance in this project. Olga Degonskaya and Olga Dombrovskaya at the Shostakovich Archive, Natalia Metelitsa at the St. Petersburg Museum of Theatre and Music, Maria Sherbakova at the Mariinsky Music Library, and of course the late and highly esteemed and beloved Elizabeth Suritz. The Golden Age in 1930 was a ballet about a Soviet soccer team visiting a decadent European country. Shostakovich wrote the music for the production at the Leningrad State Academic Theatre. Valentina Hodasevich designed sets and costumes, and a group of young choreographers, Jakobsen, Vainonen, and Chesnikov, eventually choreographed the dance. The production was beset by difficulties, and Shostakovich repeatedly complained about the theatre's chaotic approach. Yet audiences were enthusiastic, and several critics hailed the work's choreographic novelty and musical vibrancy. Others, however, wrote devastating reviews, condemning the ballet for, quote, bourgeois ideology, unquote. The Golden Age had moments of genius, but it was an awkward work that gestured at disparate ideas and lacked a single creative vision. After 19 performances, it was withdrawn from the repertoire. The Golden Age is important for its proto-Soviet components, for its place within Shostakovich's early creative development, and for its reflection of the vexed nature of ballet production at the Leningrad State Academic Theatre. Yet it was not simply a miscarriage of ideology, inexperience, and theatrical infighting. It suggested the possibility of a new genre, Soviet ballet that engaged the classical legacy while grappling with the challenges of modern directions and the demand for contemporary relevance. The Golden Age invoked formulas of classical ballet, but reinterpreted those formulas in modern terms. Shostakovich's music took up the symphonic models of Tchaikovsky and Glazunov, while stage situations and elements of design critiqued images of the classical ballerina. Meanwhile, jazz idioms, ballroom dances, and sports themes juxtaposed everyday elements of modern Soviet life against the elevated grandeur of ballet's classical past. By invoking but subverting tropes of the imperial and the Soviet periods, the Golden Age used the classical past as a source of inspiration, but also signaled ideological orthodoxy. It attempted to preserve the legacy without being tainted by it. Based on the rich archival sources for this ballet, I present the Golden Age as a response to Russian academic classicism, a reinvention that paid homage to the past while maintaining currency with the political and artistic directions of the Soviet present. Let me start with some comments about the state of Soviet ballet by the late 1920s. Ballet had been in crisis since the revolution. Appalling economic conditions had threatened ballet theaters and schools. An exodus of talent had stripped their ranks. Ideological questions were raised about ballet's right to exist in a proletarian society. And debates about the future of ballet became entwined with financial ones about how the state should spend its money. In Christina Ezrahi's words, a central question of the early Soviet cultural project was, quote, if and how Russia's pre-revolutionary cultural heritage could and should be adapted to the new cultural needs of Soviet Russia, unquote. As this applied to ballet, questions turned on the genre's relevance, its bourgeois heritage, its continuity with the past, and its ability and willingness to seek new content and forms reflecting ideologies of the present. The Bolshoi and Mariinsky theaters were called upon to adapt to these new cultural needs, but were frequently berated for their slowness in doing so. Meanwhile, other venues and studios popped up, aiming to explore alternative approaches to dance, or, as some hoped, to generate, quote, a new choreographic art, unquote, that might replace ballet altogether. But none of the experiments articulated a clear course for the development of Soviet dance. In fact, the diversity and fragmentation of choreographic approaches through the 1920s underscored a crisis of identity in Soviet ballet, a crisis marked by resistance to and confusion over change within the ballet theaters, and by complex internal and external pressures on dance. The Golden Age was a product, then, of a decade-long question about what Soviet ballet should be. In an effort to catalyze viable answers to this question, the State Academic Theatre in Leningrad announced a competition for ballet librettos in 1929. The announcement called for revolutionary topics and indicated how such topics should be explored. But submissions proved weak. In fact, most were panned by reviewers who grouched that they could have written better scenarios themselves. Eventually, but unenthusiastically, Dynamiada by Alexander Ivanovsky, a screenwriter for Soviet film, was selected as the winner. It would, of course, be renamed the Golden Age. And Shostakovich was commissioned to write the music. No other members of the creative team were identified immediately. Work on the Golden Age began under inauspicious circumstances: a feeble libretto, no choreographer or collaborators, and only a brilliant composer who had never completed a ballet score. I will not chart here the production history of the Golden Age, though it is a gripping tale of scheming, factionalism, mismanagement, and outright revolt. Suffice it to say that the production was fraught, Shostakovich was distressed, and, unsurprisingly, many aspects of the ballet changed between the commissioning and the staging of the work. What is important for us to grasp, however, is that the chaotic production affected the ballet's dramatic consistency, particularly the relationships between music and stage situations. Sometimes what the music suggested correlated strongly with what took place on the stage. These are the moments that give us greatest insight into the ballet's resources, models, and creative goals, as the music narrates with a descriptive power that illuminates what was relevant to the stage moment and what meanings were advanced. At other times, however, score and stage did not align at all. For example, music written for one purpose was recycled to another, like a dance for corps de ballet recycled into a solo variation, a change in which the music lost any descriptive relevance. Some of these infelicities arose because the scenario was not worked out from the beginning and it kept changing as Shostakovich composed the score. But most were connected to the production process after the score was finished and out of Shostakovich's hands. He demanded it back twice, but never got it. This complicates assessment of the ballet, yet significant archival materials preserve the creative record of the work and document its central concerns. In the rest of this paper, I'm dealing with the ballet as we know it from the libretto at the premiere in 1930, the final production score, designs for costumes and sets, and the new collected works edition of the published score. The Golden Age opens at an industrial exhibition in a Western capitalist city where fascists, see bourgeois visitors, parade ostentatiously while the Soviet soccer team attends unobtrusively. Diva, the favorite dancer of the decadent crowd, arrives at the exhibition's music hall and dances for her admirers. She tries to flirt with the Soviet soccer captain, but he politely refuses her advances. Outraged, provocateurs slip incriminating documents into his pocket and he is arrested. Sports games are underway at a workers' stadium, the centerpiece being a soccer match. But when two characters rush in to tell the Soviet team what has happened to their captain, the sportsmen leave the stadium. A scene at the music hall ensues. Diva dances with the leader of the fascists, who is now disguised as a Soviet soccer captain. But Western workers and Soviet sportsmen expose the farce, and the fascists flee. The ballet ends with a dance of the Western and Soviet workers. The ballet was meant to be funny, and of course the libretto is silly. But the humor was embedded within a serious rethinking of the models of ballet. The most obvious and cosmetic concern was the genre's relevance in a post-revolutionary culture. The Golden Age showed that ballet could take up ideological social content and contemporary topics. Libretto, music, and dramatic situations repeatedly advance class conflict and moral bankruptcy as the ballet's message. But a deeper concern was the genre's ability to reimagine the models of Russian classical ballet while updating balletic language and projecting new Soviet values. The Golden Age presents two opposing forces that represent good and evil, or virtue and vice. The theme is timeless, but the moralities are political. In Hodasevich's designs, for example, bourgeois characters are sumptuously and often scantily clad. Here's one of Diva's costumes. The sketch shows the ballerina in next to nothing, her bikini leaving little to the imagination. A photograph of Olga Jordan in this costume shows that she was not quite as exposed as Hodasevich's drawing suggests. Her top is a bandeau and her skirt is opaque, yet the outfit is the scantiest in the ballet. In another photograph, Diva, Jordan, wears a sparkling flapper dress whose sequins, beaded cascades, and feathered plumes convey the voluptuous pleasures of the 20s. Meanwhile, her admirers are ostentatiously dressed, like these 10 mime artists in black velvet tops, tiered skirts, rosettes, and glamorous hats. They are deeply cosmopolitan, wearing clothes that reject utility and nationality. Other costumes, like this dancer inside a hat box, critique the tropes of the 19th century classical ballerina: the point shoes, the implication of a tutu, the high, elegant hair, the open, elongated pose. The ballerina wears bows as though she is a present, but she is both constrained and absurd. She cannot move properly in such a costume. She is a ridiculous decoration at best, an object of voyeurism at worst. Costumes for sports and work, however, are entirely different. This sketch shows an outfit for 7 sportswomen, and in the original, the color scheme, which is a bit different here on the screen, the color scheme is actually identical, inviting the viewer to compare the two images of the female figure. But here the ballerinas are no gift to be got at. They are strong, sensible, and contemporary, part of a team, a collective. Their costumes are functional, not individualized. They obliterate difference. These kinds of designs in the Golden Age visually reinforce the ballet's moralities. Shostakovich explained that his music participated in this blunt characterization of types. In his words, it juxtaposed the unhealthy eroticism of bourgeois culture with the healthy calisthenics and sports of a classless society. Popular styles denote Western characters through ballroom and music hall numbers, and proletarian music, without these Western-inflected idioms, accompany Soviet characters. Beyond the ideological rationale, the sonic division is practical. It creates 2 opposing soundscapes that act as musical shorthand for the dramatic conflict of the story. While the sound is modern, however, the balletic structures that the music supports are often thoroughly classical. Petipa's codified forms, like the pas d'action, the Act 3, divertissement, classical variations, character dancing, are all present but disguised. Dances are infused with new movements. Important dances belong to the wrong characters, and the music defamiliarizes the dance procedures. For example, Act 1 transforms a classical pas d'action and then confirms the transfigured form with an allusion to the Sleeping Beauty. The component parts of a pas d'action are an entrée, adagio, variation, and coda, all of which are embedded but wittily masked in scene 2. Diva enters to important introductory music, her entrée, and then dances a supported adagio, a variation, and a pas de deux with her partner that finishes with a coda for corps de ballet. The arrival of the Soviet football team, our soccer team, and Soviet dance provide the dramatic link between Diva's presentation in the entrée and adagio and her virtuosic display in the variation and pas de deux, designed to attract the attention of the Soviet captain. The dances for corps de ballet, arranged around the traditional components of the pas d'action, confirmed the classical formula. The scene opens with the Golden Youth dancing a fast foxtrot in F minor until Diva's arrival arrests the revelry. She enters to trombone slides and a saxophone solo before the piccolo clarinet takes over with cadenza-like flourishes. In the Petipa repertoire, this passage, the introduction to the Adagio, was conveyed almost exclusively by the harp, and Shostakovich certainly knew this. Giving the passage to the piccolo clarinet, as he does here, subverts both the classical convention and the character. The sardonic quality of the solo instrument, which Shostakovich used to parodistic effect in other works too, underscores the distortion. As a beloved dancer of the fascists, Diva is the wrong character to have this moment. Diva's Adagio then characterizes her as seductive, sensual, and bourgeois. It opens with a simple chordal vamp in the low register before the melody emerges in the soprano saxophone. The instrument associates her, of course, with a jazz EDM. You might want to turn your volumes up for this, it's quieter. But the moment go beyond character and Diva, allude to Aurora's Rose Adagio in Sleeping Beauty. Let me compare the two scenes. First, the choreographic situations are similar. The prima ballerina is introduced to a circle of admirers. The implication in both ballets is that these admirers include potential suitors, none of whom is the ballerina's real interest. Second, the music parallels the allusions in the stage situation. The openings of the two adagios bear a strong resemblance. Both are in E-flat major, both are in 4, both begin with almost the same gesture, a rising arpeggiated E-flat triad, and both sequence 2 repetitions of it in the chordal accompaniment. In both, the melodies begin on the downbeat with a sustained note before they depart in different directions on the beat 3. Of course, there are obvious differences too. The melody in Sleeping Beauty is played in grand gestures by the strings and falls to a 7th in the first bar, whereas the melody in the Golden Age emerges in the solo saxophone and rises through the octave. However, in placement, the placement, preparation, key, meter, accompaniment, seriousness of presentation, and above all, the strong vocality of the melody lines create a strikingly similar effect. Shostakovich's Diva is an Aurora for the jazz age. All right, so here's Aurora's Adagio in Sleeping Beauty. The allusion to the Rose Adagio is brief, but it sets the elevated tone of Diva's Adagio, a quality that is sustained through a large-scale form and returns in the pas de deux at the end of the pas d'action. The eminent critic and Shostakovich's friend Ivan Solotinsky singled out Diva's music for praise, calling it beautiful, profound, and symphonic. For writing such as this, he saluted Shostakovich as the balletic heir to Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky. Meanwhile, the libretto instructed Soviet audiences to see Diva's dances as erotic. And Soviet writers assured their readers that no one was meant to admire these passages, but to understand their, quote, sarcastic attitude, unquote. Yet it is hard to wring sarcasm out of the elegiac tone of Diva's music. Whatever the silliness of the scenario, there is nothing frivolous about Shostakovich's presentation of Diva. His music for her in Act 1 is the apex of the dramatic and poetic writing in the ballet. In this paper, I have proposed that the Golden Age invoked the classical legacy of Russian ballet while infusing the references with the sounds and steps of modern life. Classicism can be observed in the codified forms of 19th century ballet and the allusion to the Tchaikovsky Perapa repertoire. Modernity is evident in the sports topic and in the musical dances. Of course, classical and modern elements are not discrete from each other, but intertwined. The foxtrot, for example, ushers in Diva's pas d'action. Yet their presence creates a pastiche of impulses in the Golden Age that is further complicated by ideological messaging. The ballet gestured towards the academic classical past and the contemporary present, reinterpreting both in Soviet terms, but giving both a place in Soviet ballet. In doing so, it aimed to align the demands of the genre with the ideological requirements of the Soviet context. The Golden Age also introduces us to Shostakovich as a ballet composer, to his knowledge of the repertoire, the subtlety of his allusions, and the projection of dramatic meaning and emotional intimacy in his music. At the same time, it illuminates the artistic context at the end of the 1920s, including the huge range of artistic options available to Soviet ballet, yet the increasing constraints on how those options would or could be read. Ultimately, the Golden Age demonstrates early Soviet ballet's dependence on the classical vocabulary, but also its impulses in other directions altogether. The work used the techniques of the past to look at the present, while also using present artistic concerns to inform past practices. While the Golden Age did not solve the crisis of Soviet ballet, it offered a series of perspectives on what Soviet ballet could be, and in doing so asserted the genre's creative potential in the search for Soviet dance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for another illuminating paper and very thought-provoking. Does anybody want to start off with any questions? Otherwise, I'd love to start with a question. It's purely to satisfy my own ignorance. Why was football chosen in the ballet as, I mean, is there any significance behind choosing football rather than something else?
Well, the football aspect is the most well-known aspect of the ballet because of the characters, the Soviet captain and the team. And then there's actually one dance, only one dance, in which you have a football game. There was also a contemporary ballet at the Bolshoi Theater, exactly contemporary, also 1930, called Futbolist, that also explored the topic of football, a soccer team. I'm using the terms interchangeably here, having just watched, England versus Italy on Sunday. The topic of football, the topic of sports generally, shall I say that first, was a fashionable one in 1920s ballet, both in Russia and in the Western repertoire as well. It signaled different things in the two different repertoires, with the Western repertoire using the sports topic to deal with a kind of chic lifestyle modernism, as Lynn Garofla has explained. Whereas in the Soviet repertoire, it was much more about projecting Soviet values and the participation in physical cultura activities and the amateur nature rather than the professional nature of sports. And then within that, football or soccer was a national obsession. And the football jersey itself was a kind of symbol of modernity for Soviet youth at this time. So it's both a current topic on the stage, and it's also a way of kind of theatricalizing a national obsession.
I'm guessing Shostakovich's love of the sport must have also played into it somewhat.
Right. And of course, the topic comes from Ivanovsky's libretto originally, right? And But yes, we know how much Shostakovich was devoted to football. And there's actually a chapter on that in Braginsky's book, recent book. I think it was published in Russian in 2018 and then in English in 2019. There's a chapter on the football topic specifically in this ballet. He also suggests in there, Braginsky suggests that football and the Dynamo Football Club in Moscow, so there's an echo of the name in the Dynamiada, the original name of the ballet, that that was associated with the Cheka, because Dzerzhinsky was the first chairman of the Dynamo Football Club. And so he suggests that there may have been some resonances with that in the title.
Any more questions? Otherwise, I have one more, sorry. In terms of ballet suffering this decline, it's understandable within Soviet ideology. Was that actually mirrored in any way? I mean, not because of ideology, but the decline in interest in ballet across Europe or just wider? Or is this a particularly Soviet problem at this time?
Well, you know, I think if we look at the repertoire also in the West in the 1920s, and particularly the Ballet Russe repertoire, there's a lot of experimentation and a lot of shifting of identities. And I think again of Lynn Garofalo, who talks about that in her amazing book on the Ballet Russe, as the 1920s is this time of they explore ideas like classicism in the sense of the Greek and Roman classical past. Then there's the topic of lifestyle modernism that is explored in other ballets. The arrival of Prokofiev on the scene changes the type of repertoire and topics as well that get taken up. And so I think the 1920s also in the Western repertoire is similarly a kind of searching for identity, but of course driven by very different artistic concerns, or at least some of the artistic concerns are different. I think the desire to reinvent and innovate rather than imitate in the balletic language is something that was shared. But how they went about that was very different.
I think Anna wanted to ask a question. Yes.
Yes, I would like to know. Yes, please. I would like to know if there are new production of this ballet in the West. In Russia, it was, I think, in Bolshoi in 2016, and in other theaters. And abroad in the West, do you know something about the new production of this ballet?
I don't know about a Western production. That's something I wonder. Does anyone know if it has been performed or taken to the West? In either, the Mariinsky also did a production in 2006, I think, but it's quite different. And of course, the production in the 80s completely changed the libretto and a lot of the music. So I don't know if we can call it the same ballet.
Yes, it was
Grigorovich's. Sorry, we lost you. You're muted. You're muted. We lost you. Anna.
Do you hear me
Now,
now?
yes.
Sorry, I'm wondering, yes, it was both in Mariinsky and Bolshoi, let's say the reinterpretation. So I'm wondering if also happened in London, and New York, or in Berlin, I don't know, in the Europe with this ballet, the Golden Age.
I don't know. I wonder, Simon, do you know if this ballet has been performed in the West or even taken there by any of the theaters?
No, it wasn't. As far as I know, the Grigorovich version of it remained with him and in the Bolshoi, but it wasn't toured. So I always wondered whether or not Razumovskaya might do it, because he did the other two Shostakovich ballets. Mm-hmm. I think he declined because Yuri Nikolaevich Grigorovich is still the ballet master of the Bolshoi and still active. So I think that's not going to happen.
That's what I heard as well. Yeah. but maybe he will in time.
In time. I know that the great lost Shostakovich ballet with that Grigorovich for a long time agitated for was doing Master and Margarita. There was a lot of dialogue between the two of them, and then Irina Antonovna, after the death of Shostakovich, apparently was in discussions with Grigorovich about that.
Right. But unfortunately, we have no other ballets besides the 3 from him.
Well, there was that one, what was it, the name of that? Olga Digonskaya will know, the Hooligan and the Baroness, I think it was called. It was a sort of mock-up ballet.
Right.
It was done with a pastiche of his music. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There are no other questions for now. Thank you again, Laura.